Now.
Okay.
All right. So on my Canvas page, and I'm guessing you did something similar, you have the PowerPoint and the slides that we are going to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So if you are Mr. Wong's student and you don't know where that is, we'll wait till he gets on and he can probably show you where it's at. But it's on my page. If you want to see the slides, it's on Mr. Dorado's page. So what we're going to do, it's less than 20 slides. And what we're trying to do is to walk you through what you can expect on Friday. I would like to open up. Has anybody heard anything, or anybody who has taken an AP test? How has it gone so far? How was it logging in? How was it submitting? Does anybody have any experience? All right. If you do, just later on, feel free to jump in. But what we're going to do is try to talk a little bit about what we've heard works the best. We'll then walk through real quick the 8 periods. I know you're like, well, there's a couple of periods that aren't being covered. We're going to just talk about those in a way to understand contextualization. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll talk about some positive things you can do leading into the test and during test time. Mr. Dorado, you want to add anything?
No, we're good. We're good. Mr. Wong's in, so I'll have him be a co-host as well, and we're on our way.
So, Mr. Wong, where did you post the link to the slides? You're muted.
The link to which slides, Chris? Mr. Makashar?
Say it again.
Slides. Which slides are you asking?
The ones we're going to go through. Did you post that link?
I posted it. I sent it in an email.
Okay. So they should check their emails. All right.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, and again, I will say this, and sorry, we got a new puppy and likes to bark at everything. What we're going to try to do is to just talk in general about what we can expect. So what I am going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go ahead and pull up. Well, I already have it here. And so we are going to go from, let's see, present. There we go. We're going to go from this. It's less than 20. Our goal is to get you out in an hour. If we need to go a little longer, we can. But so again, you can find this either through email or on Canvas pages. So our agenda tonight, what we're looking at here is College Board info, just some very, very general College Board things. We'll run through the different periods and give you some advice there. We'll talk about some do's and don'ts with the DBQ, how to submit, and then our final thoughts. So that's kind of our goal. If you need to come in and out for whatever reason, feel free. This is strictly optional. Mr. Wong, Mr. Dorado, anything?
Definitely pay attention, guys. This is well worth your while. This will help you a lot.
And we are going to record it so you can go back and listen for certain things that maybe you missed. Okay, so it will be recorded.
Yeah, I would suggest that you guys have some kind of notepad or your notebooks near you too, and just kind of jot notes down. And then also, if you have questions, try to put those into the chat so that we can address those later on when we have a point where we can kind of talk about that.
Excellent idea. All right. So with that in mind, Friday, May 15th, 2 p.m. Here's what we've been hearing, that there has been difficulties logging in. So our suggestion is to begin to try to log in at 1 o'clock. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to start at 1, but you need to keep working through the process. If it denies you, keep hitting refresh and keep trying to log in. We advise, now AP advises at 1:30. We advise a little bit before that. But again, work at whatever your kind of how you want to do it, okay? But this is where it's advisable. We cannot help you. So we'll talk about some of the things that you can do here coming up, but it's really important that you make sure you set your alarms and you are ready to go and such. We also want to advise, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, we really make sure, and you got to plan out now where you are going to take your test. Okay, whether you are taking it in a quiet room, in your bedroom, someplace where you have enough space to be able to work. We'll talk about some of the things that we suggest that you should have, but that's probably the most important thing at this point, is to make sure that you have a good area you can work without interruptions. And that's going to be key, because if you have to go tend to somebody or do something because somebody needs your help, you're going to miss out. There is no making up that time. So you have to limit your time. Mr. Dorado, Mr. Wong, anything?
No.
Okay.
Good.
So just jump in when you need to. Okay.
Sure.
So you should have received your exam ticket today. It looks something like what you see on the right-hand side. What I've done is I blacked out kind of the name and their AP number. But so this is what you're looking for, is it should be in your email, especially the one that you gave to AP. You can find that within my AP. Okay, if you did not get this email, you're going to then want to go to apstudents.collegeboard.org, and on that main page, there is a place where you can submit your name to be checked. Okay, so that's really important that you make sure you take care of this. To go along with that we don't necessarily have on here is there's an AP demo. I think it's a little bit later. There's an AP demo where you can go in and practice submitting. I highly suggest you use your ID and get in and practice a couple of times so that you're familiar with the process.
You want to feel at ease when you get to exam time, and not be stressing about any of this procedural preparations. You know, we still got another day. We got tomorrow, we got tonight. There are opportunities for you to kind of dedicate yourself and make sure that you have this done, because you don't want to have to worry about this on Friday.
Yeah, most definitely. And don't wait till Friday to practice it either, because people are taking an exam, or people are taking like physics or AP Human Geo or whatever's up. They're going to be taking those exams. So we have heard there has been some issues with submitting, logging in. The key is being patient. The good thing is there's a backup. If an error does occur on test day, whether your power goes out, you can't log in, you get sick, you're going to automatically have a makeup exam. So all you have to do is fill out this form, and you'll automatically get the makeup exam. Now, if you submit, then they're going to go with that one. Although you can go back, if I remember correctly, you can go back and say that you had some issues, and they will let you take the makeup exam. I think they said that's going to be in June. I didn't get that exact date. Do you guys know that? Anyway,
Yeah,
that's something we can look up.
You can look up.
Yeah. So again, this is why it's really important to make sure that you are understanding what you are going to need to do. Make sure you have found your AP exam ticket. You write down your AP ID number. You know your password. You know your login. Have that all ready to go. Okay? All right. So what we're going to do next is just kind of quickly talk about each of the periods. Now, what you'll notice is we're going to give just kind of a little bit of overview. And in fact, we'll probably not even read this, but we'll talk about what we want you to kind of think about. Because in my mind, and each, just so all the students understand, each one of us kind of has a different perspective on how we think the exam is going to play out. And so that's the hard part about this exam. We are not going to know what the questions are going to entail. It's one question. How can they measure everything you know in one question? I think, Mr. Dorado thinks, that they're going to do something that crosses multiple periods. So that's why it's going to be really important that you make sure you kind of at least review periods 1 and 2.
Okay, here's what I
Shut
need to
up.
unlock your device.
Sorry. Apparently my phone's thinking I'm talking to it. All right, sorry. Okay, so period 1. So what do we need to kind of remember for period one? So we definitely know the starting date. You know, whenever you're looking at periods, make sure you're looking at the dates and you ask yourself the question, why was that date chosen? So 1491, why is that significant? Well, it's the year before Columbus. So what they're trying to do is give a little perspective of what life was like in North, Central, and South America, although we don't really see much of Central and South America. But what do we know? We know that there were, and this is where we kind of see these big concepts down at the bottom. We had multiple Native American societies. In fact, we see something along the lines, and I'm just making this number up, but over 1,000 different language and cultural groups. I know it's close to being equal to what Africa has as far as cultural language groups, but not as many. So 1,000 is an incredible number. These were independent kingdoms, societies who had some interaction with others, but generally were fairly isolated. And it's not until then, 1492, that we see Columbus. Now, AP doesn't really ask too much about the Spanish colonization. They do a little bit, but really we are much more English focused, European focused as far as colonization. There we go. Okay, so there will not be a question over Native American societies. There will not be a question over during this time period, the way they adapted to their environment, but it would help to kind of just have a general idea. There are Eastern Indians, there are Midwestern Indians, there are Western Indians, there are Southwestern Indians, and each one kind of has some cultural features. We don't need to waste our time going through those today. So that might be something to review, but again, I think that's something that probably you don't have to worry about. Spanish exploration, perhaps. We definitely know the impact that it had on native populations. The number one thing is disease and death. That's two. There's two things, disease and death. And how was that brought about? That was brought about by the encomienda system. If you remember, the encomienda system was a large tract of land was granted to a colonizer, and on that large tract of land was the native peoples who lived on it, and they were transferred to ownership. So it's a form of slavery. We know that the native peoples were worked extensively, often to their deaths. A new labor source was needed, and that's why the Europeans eventually looked to Africa to bring in workers and laborers and slaves. And then the last thing for period one, I would say, is the Columbian Exchange. Do you have to know what was it? No. But what you need to understand is when the Americas eventually met up with Europe in the Old World, foodstuffs, culture, diseases, you name it, was transferred between the two. The Old World got access to New World items. New World got access to Old World items. I don't know. Gentlemen, you want to add anything? I kind of was through that.
I mean, I think you did an excellent job there. I think one thing that we could also think about with the Columbian Exchange and kind of thinking about it as a broader historical process is that these processes will see happening throughout the periods that follow period one. The cultural interactions and the conflicts that exist between the colonists and the native groups, and this is going to extend all the way into period 6. So this is going to be a big portion of that. And really thinking about Columbian Exchange, we can take some of those broad processes within each period and try to make connections between how things are changing over time, or what influences this has on our major themes like politics and economics. So just something to kind of add in, but I think Mr. Megashar did a great job there of covering important aspects too.
You know what, guys, I would also think while you're doing this, think big picture. In Encomienda, a labor system. Well, where have there been other labor systems that have existed throughout the times that we've discussed? And so look at it from that perspective as well. If there's a question or a document that deals with labor, that deals with workers, think of how you can put something into it that would give you that extra point for outside information, or will give you an extra edge for contextualization. And so this is what you have to think of in regards to big picture. Like Mr. Long was saying, the Columbian exchange is trade. You can take trade all the way up to today and talk about how we have the situation with even China today and the difficulties that we're having. So that's what I think you should be putting into your heads. How can I take this one concept and have it be applicable to all the different periods that we're going to be tested over? Think of a couple of big ones and try to apply it to all the periods.
I agree. Labor systems. Immediately, I think Industrial Revolution and how labor was changed. And so now I can make a comparison between encomienda. If we're talking about Columbian exchange, what was one product that was exchanged from the old world to the new was cotton. Well, how did that product affect American history? I mean, you think about just the role of cotton itself, that goes all the way to period 5, period 6, and beyond. So again, these are things that you're going to have to think about, big ideas as they cross broad kind of topics. Okay. But in the end, you're not going to really need to know period 1. All right. Period 2. So this is where we start to get the first real vestiges of American national identity, but I'm kind of jumping ahead. Really what we see at this point is the British colonizing the Americas. We know that each of the colonies were essentially separate countries, even though they were tied to their home country, even though they were tied in a mercantilist system where the home country relies upon the colonial economy to produce the goods that are produce the raw materials that are needed to be produced in Europe. Okay. But again, the key is they're individual colonies and very reluctantly become kind of co-conspirators in the revolution. Now the revolution is the next period. But what we're seeing here is up through 1754, this is the end or the start of the French and Indian Revolution, French and Indian War, not revolution. Why was that significant? Why was the French and Indian War significant? And so, you never really have to know wars, but you have to know what results or what's an effect of the war. So what comes out of the French and Indian War is the British have tremendous amount of debt. And because they have tremendous amount of debt, they want to kind of have the colonies have to help pay for some of that debt to kind of reduce that. Now, there are other issues as well, but the French and Indian War becomes this pivotal time where all of a sudden everything changes. You could say that we're in one of those times where everything is changing because of coronavirus. Well, with the French and Indian War, everything changed. You can see the characteristics. This would be another thing that you might want to just concentrate on is make sure you know the difference between the Southern, the Mid-Atlantic, and the New England colonies. But again, I don't really see that as being as singularly important, but you should be able to tie it in because later on, Southern versus New England becomes kind of the rivalry between regions of the United States. So especially when we get into slaveholding and, economic competition, the South and the North are pretty adversarial. Gentlemen, you want to add?
I think of the French, think of the Spanish, and think of the British and how they treated individuals that were here before them. That would be a good thing when you're discussing immigration. That would be a good thing when you're looking at, once again, the big picture of how people treat others that are either here or that are coming. And that is, once again, think of it, how can you place that into the different periods of U.S. history? So that'd be one of the continuity fields that you'd be looking at.
So what might you say? What might be a comparison that you can make? How did the English treat, let's say, natives versus the French? Mr. Dorado, you muted yourself.
As we know, the French were much more inclined to deal with the Native Americans. They actually married. They actually were not forcing them to take their particular religion. And so they were much more respectful of the Native Americans. They were almost in an equal partnership in some respects when it came to trade, when it came to fur trading. So you have that mentality versus the Brits that were very much it's our way or no way. Either you do what we tell you to do, or you're going to pay the consequences for that. And then the Spaniards were someone in between. So you have this, you know, when the Irish came, for example, when they came and how poorly they were treated by those that were here, you sort of have that mentality of how people treat others that are different from them. And you can place this, as I said, throughout. Look at what we did to the Chinese, the only race of people that we actually excluded from coming to this country. So keep those ideas in mind, okay, when you're thinking of this.
One thing I could add here with, and I'll try to make this kind of quick so we can get into the next period, but I'm looking at the economic policies down here, and I'm thinking about, you know, if I were to look at some of these terms and starting to review these, starting to think about how does these economic policies, how are they tied to other things that are happening? You know, mercantilism is an economic system that has a heavy element of a nation state or an emerging nation state or some form of government trying to protect certain types of trade. Slave trade, and you can connect that to political rights for people and these changing conceptions around equality and even American identity, right? Salutary neglect is a government policy that has some really kind of wide-ranging implications that the British didn't realize at the outset, that they had been kind of allowing the colonists to do a lot of trade without heavy taxation. Well, then once they start to try to impose that, it has all these huge impacts in the colonies that leads to the American Revolution. And you know, just kind of looking at each of those, just thinking about how can you make these connections across time periods with different types of themes. And again, like Mr. Dorado said, thinking about that big picture. How can I tie these things in to other time periods and kind of be prepared for potential DBQ prompts?
Yeah, I would be very surprised if the DBQ prompt is just like period 3 and period 3 before. It would be very, very difficult. So, but big ideas, make connections. I always try to think about it as kind of, you know, I'm riffing on a subject, or so I could start out with like immigration and begin to move my thought process. If I think about immigration, the United States, has the United States been open or closed to immigration? Well, at certain times it's open. When was that? Well, early on, but was there, you know, and so I can keep kind of just adding to the narrative as I work through each of these content or each of these periods, whether, or I do it with economics, or kind of what is the prevailing kind of presidential themes of the time period. So constantly thinking about big picture and cross connections. Okay, anything else before we start on period 3?
Do it.
All right, so period 3, 1754 to 1800. Whoops, there it is. So this is where we get this transition. Here's the transition where the colonies begin to work together reluctantly. Some colonies don't even like each other. There's a big rivalry between Virginia and Massachusetts. There's a big rivalry with Pennsylvania. So these colonies, you know, they're independent, but they start to become kind of forced to work together. It's kind of like when you guys have to work in groups with people you don't like. It's exactly the same. You want a product, sometimes you got to work with them. So we see a lot of growing tensions between not only the colonies themselves, but the colonies in Great Britain. And what is it over? It goes back to the French and Indian War and the idea of debt, the idea of salutary neglect. Just for those of you that don't remember salutary neglect, that is where kind of the mother country doesn't necessarily pay attention to too intimately with their colony because the colony's doing a good job of kind of operating on its own. So there's positives and negatives to that. The positive is you have a colony that's producing a lot of raw materials that's being sent back to the mother country, great relationship. The bad thing is those colonies are starting to think more and more independently. They make decisions on their own. One of the things that led to salutary neglect was also the distance between Great Britain and the colonies. So, you know, it takes 6 months for any sort of message to cross the Atlantic twice. Very difficult to kind of manage a country. And so that's where salutary neglect comes in as well. Period 3 goes up all the way to the end of the Revolutionary period. So that this also includes George Washington and John Adams as president. It's not until period 3 that we see Thomas Jefferson as period 4, excuse me, that we see Thomas Jefferson as president. So we want to think about what is not only how does, sorry, I keep doing that. How do the British, God, I'm such an idiot. Okay, how do the British try to control the colonies? So we know there's all those acts, whether it's the Townsend Act or the Stamp Act. You know, it's good to have 1 or 2 of those written off to the side. Later on, Mr. Dorado has on here a really good piece of some things that you should have at your little battle desk when you're ready to take your test. And one of them would be key words from each period that you can kind of make sure that you use in your essay. So in this case, I might have a couple of taxes. I don't need to know all of them, but I have to know a couple of them, like maybe the Townsend Act, or maybe the Stamp Act, or maybe the Sugar Act, and be able to use that if I need to. That is one way a country tries to control its populace is by taxing goods. I could pull that out and put it with multiple periods. God, stop touching it. Okay. So what else? We know the Revolutionary War. I don't think we really are going to need to know anything about the Revolutionary War. No battles. I think you need to know who won. Other than that, I don't think it's really that important. I mean, it's important, don't get me wrong, but in any other year. But I think in this one, I don't see it. Unless they ask a question about have the ideals of the revolution carried on through the end of World War II, which they could ask.
Mm-hmm.
I would kind of pay attention a little bit to the Articles of Confederation. This is our first attempt at a constitution. It did not work. It worked for a little bit. It helped us with the most important thing, which allowed the American colonies to defeat the British. But beyond that, it really had some huge holes. And probably the biggest hole was its inability to tax its citizens. So it had to rely upon each state to almost voluntarily donate money to the national government. As far as the Constitution goes, definitely I would kind of review the different arguments. What were the big states arguing for? What were the little states arguing for? What were the northern states arguing for? What were the southern states arguing for? Because that argument is going to carry into the next 3 or 4 preceding periods. Okay, so I don't think there's going to be a big question on the Constitution, but certainly if that's one of your strengths, have that off to the side, ready to incorporate in when you can. That's the other thing. Work from your strengths. We cannot emphasize that enough. If you're really good with, like you remember Jackson really well and the policies around Jackson, then you got to work with that. And if there's an opportunity to include some Jackson in the essay, include it. There's your outside evidence. But it has to fit with the prompt. As far as Washington and Adams administrations, I would pay attention to Washington's farewell address. That seems to be a very, very popular item that AP likes to test on. So he had 2 main focus ideas in his address. If you remember, one of them was avoid foreign entanglements. Don't get involved with other countries. And that does pretty well up until Monroe, where the Europeans are starting to come back in and he issues the Monroe Doctrine, and then it's pretty good for a while, and then we have to reassert it. So that's one, stay out of foreign entanglements. And then the second one was be fearful of political parties. He calls them political factions. Mr. Dorado, you're much more versed in that. Would you want to add anything on the Washington farewell address?
Take into account how those two can fit throughout all periods. Once again, political parties, my God. Look how Republicans and Democrats are today. We can't get a stinking thing done. Look at, how we had difficulty in 1860 with the election of Lincoln, how no Southern state voted Republican. So you can take that concept that Washington had and once again tie it to every single period to make your point. The same thing about excessive entanglements. Our involvement in World War II. We did not want to get involved in World War I. We were afraid to do so. We wanted to stay isolated. But when we got involved, then we started to think, wait a second. And then right after that, what did we do? We wanted to go back into a shell again and not get involved because we wanted to make sure that our country was where it needed to be before we worried about any other. So think of big picture once again. And those two from his address can fit anywhere, guys and gals. That can fit anywhere.
So what do you guys think about Adams' administration? I really don't think there'll be anything on Adams. That's just the end of the kind of the Federalist period.
I would know Federalist, Anti-Federalist.
Yeah.
Adams and Washington Federalist, Jefferson Anti-Federalist, a peaceful exchange of power from one party to the other, which up until that time was almost never, almost never happened. And so that transition was pretty big in regards to our system. So yeah, I would know the parties. I think that would be important. Federalists and anti-federalists, what they believe. I would know that.
Logan Imel, is that your dog? That dog is a little chubby. Wow. All right. Sorry. Anything else you want to talk about with period 3? Now, this is the first one that they're requiring you. So because this is their starting point, I would probably review this one pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going to want to review all of them, but
thinking about some big themes here too, and I think again, Mayshar and Dorado have done a great job of talking about tying this into how to get points on the DBQ, right? We're thinking, keeping that mindset of getting these passing scores, getting as many points as we can. Some of the big things that are starting here in period 3 is the basic structures for the American Republic, and all the debates that are happening that we would see then also dragging on into other periods of time. How strong should the federal government be in relation to the states, and how that plays into arguments around the expansion of slavery out west. There's a lot of things I think in these concepts that you could use on different types of questions about things like American identity, views of equality, or political groups, pulling in political parties. There's a lot of different ways that I think that you could think about making those connections again. Thinking about that big picture and trying to understand things from a lot of different angles or too.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, keep in mind as well what Mr. Wong said. National government versus states. Look what's happening with the coronavirus. States want to open up. They want to get going. They want to make sure. Arizona's saying, hell, we're going to do whatever we want. Florida's saying, screw you, we're going to do everything right now. And so you have them saying it's our constitutional right to do this. And then you have the federal government saying, well, you know what, you should be a little more careful of that. And so you have this conflict that happened back then that is still going on today. That's how you got to think. Okay, that's how you have to think when you take this. All right. How is what happened back then still an issue today? How can you make those connections?
I agree.
A couple of our core historical thinking skills, 2 of them that we've talked about a lot that I think will help us make those connections, is change and continuity over time, right? Because we're looking at a DBQ that's going through all these.
Froze.
We're kind of losing you, Mr. Wong.
Yeah, you froze, bud.
All right, well, we'll just kind of continue here. If you are having like audio or audio problems or video problems, if you want to turn off your camera, it really does help with connection. So
Oh, sorry, I missed that. What did you say?
I was just saying you faded out. So I was just saying one of the things you can do is just remove the video from your screen.
Okay.
But not you. We want to see your
So,
Fu Manchu there, Mr. Wong. It's a sweet mustache.
It is. Yin yang, man.
I'll tell you what, I may have to trim all mine
quarantine
down.
fashion.
All right, let's get back. It's not about me.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, we're good.
So again, the significance, French and Indian War, end of the federal, or end of kind of the federal administration, Washington and Adams. So starting in 1800 becomes this new century. You guys kind of remember what it was like when we went from 1999 to 2000. Actually, you don't. You
weren't even around.
You weren't even born. So never mind. I'll forget that. Unfortunately, I've seen many decades turn over. Too many, in fact. All right. So period 4, 1800 to 1848. So this is the rise of Jeffersonian politics, the rise of the common man, the rise of agricultural America. Not saying it didn't exist before that, but that's kind of the beginning. It's kind of power back to the states. And that's one of the things Jefferson and his kind of minions really pushed during this time. And then 1848. This is chosen because, well, we have kind of the last, let's see, I'm trying to look here. Jacksonian, he's done by what, 34, 36? I'm blanking. Why is 1848 chosen?
Mexico.
Mexico. There you go. Thank you. So the Mexican War. So where we get Texas and parts of Arizona, California. But yeah, you can see a couple of the topics here. Jeffersonian era, the era of good feelings. Really, this is the time period that comes right before or in between Jefferson and Jackson. This is a time when things are going really good. It's the next generation of leaders. I think with, let's see, Monroe, John Quincy Adams, is he the last one of the revolutionary leaders? I think there's one more past him. Anyway, so we're seeing the end of the old revolutionary ideal, and now we're into how do we begin to maximize our wealth? And this whole period is about maximizing wealth. Everything that is done, whether it is the evolution of political parties. You know, I teach U.S. government as well, and one of the things I talk about almost not ad nauseum is the idea that political parties exist to control money, to win elections. Once you win elections, you then can control the flow of cash. Okay, so to me, political parties, this becomes a very important aspect for me to think about. We get this sort of polarization between the people who believed in kind of national politics versus those who believe in state politics. We also have a movement of westward expansion. So it's not only the Louisiana Purchase. I know specifically there's 2 or 3 maps. If you look up like America annexation map, you can see kind of literally a map that shows as we move farther and farther west, we acquired more and more land. Why didn't anybody put up any sort of fight against us? Because essentially nobody had the ability to stop us. So westward expansion, including Louisiana Purchase. Now I think immediately Louisiana Purchase. Why is that really significant? Because if I go back to Jefferson is an agriculturalist. Jefferson is a states' rights person. What's the problem with a person who believes in states' rights purchasing a huge part of the middle part of the United States, modern day United States? What's the issue there? Well, as Jefferson becomes president, he starts to see that the role of the president, he has to do things that go against what he naturally believes. For the betterment of our country, it's important that we acquire this land. There is nothing in the Constitution that says the president has the power to purchase land. Nothing. And because of that, a lot of people really became disillusioned with Jefferson. You guys want to add anything to that?
Well, Jefferson, as Mr. Mengashar said, agrarian society. His thinking was take this land, we'll have more farmers will be able to balance this whole identity that we're getting when it comes to merchants, when it comes to making money. And, you know, like sort of the counterbalance Hamilton's idea of a bank, and to do those different types of things. Jefferson was thinking if I have more land, more farmers, more, let's say a better chance of keeping this country smaller, so to speak, even though we're getting larger, his idea was that we would get smaller. And, but was, you know, what Mr. Megashar said is so true. It goes contra to what he really believed in, though, which is weird. Big contradiction with him.
You know, one thing we can also see here with this evolution of political parties is, you know, political parties are representing, in a lot of ways, economic interests. You know, how Megashar mentioned that political parties control kind of what they call the purse strings on not only how the government is using resources, but also the shape of the economy. Whereas in period 3, we might have seen the early structures of government come about. I think in period 4, we really see there's different views around how the economy should really evolve and grow in America. At the same time, there's other factors happening like Western expansion. More access to land means more access to natural resources. Well, who's going to control that? Is it going to be the common American? Or it's going to be bigger industrial leaders of the time. Okay, and then also thinking about how the Industrial Revolution, all these innovations that are happening that are allowing for the railroad system to really expand, and the factory system to really expand. Again, just going back to making those connections, thinking about the relationship of these political parties and the views that they articulate and the ways that they're going about thinking of how should America grow. Because with with Louisiana Purchase, our country gains about twice as much land, and it's not even the full measure of what we get later on, but that's huge, and how much that changes everything. And even our political leaders, how they're thinking about things as we've got this huge amount of land now.
So I personally, when I look at period 4, to me, it's all about this market revolution, everything. So because of our westward expansion, we now have 3 really separate regions. Now we have the Northeast, we have the South, and we have what is called the West at this time. And the West is Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, right? And with the development of kind of 3 separate regions, each region has their own economic power. So the Northeast, we know, is manufacturing, shipping. The South is agriculture, but agriculture, more cash crops, such as cotton, such as indigo, such as really the only food stuff I really think of as rice is the only one, but sugarcane, cotton, so cash crops. And then the Midwest or the West, they are kind of the breadbasket of America. So it's because of this new market revolution and the connections of railroads that these 3 regions really become intertwined. But what we really see is the Northeast and the West become much more intertwined than the North and the South. So there's still, it's much more east-west with the railroads building, not so much north-south, or as much. And as a result of that, new processes are created. So this is kind of the first industrial revolution. This is where steam power is harnessed. This is where railroads, rudimentary, machineries. We also get, what's the manufacturing process with all the parts?
Interchangeable parts.
Thank you, interchangeable parts. So this is the interchangeable parts. So all of a sudden we go from one person creating one good to now multiple people creating multiple goods with only one role along the way. So that's where I really see this period is all about that growth that was mentioned earlier. And as a result, we're going to get this growing sectionalism. The South they're not very happy that the two other regions are kind of benefiting much more from railroads than they are. They're feeling that one of their main economic platforms, slavery, is under kind of fire from the Northerners and the Midwesterners. They feel like they are being kind of cornered or put into a place that they're not comfortable with, and they are not willing to give up slavery. In fact, they're pushing for even more slavery. And we see as we acquire more and more land moving westward, that there becomes this issue of how do we fairly determine what the new territory will be? Will it be a slave state? Will it be a non-slave state or a free state? And then really the last thing within this is, I'm way out of this. Jeez. Okay. Is abolitionism. I think slavery is important in this era as a way to kind of make a connection. Slavery really becomes the focal point in the next period. We know slavery exists. We know it's morally a bankrupt economic system. We know it's a system that can't be continued for long periods of time. But the reality is the Southerners, they see it as the only way that they can compete with the other two regions. Anything else, period 4?
Henry Clay.
Henry Clay. Gotta put, why Henry Clay, Mr. Grotto?
The national system, the American system, the three things that he strongly believed in: tariffs, national banks, and assistance by the federal government to improve transportation, especially canals and railroad. Right,
Yeah.
so he's a must here when you talk about the market revolution. He is a must.
Yeah. So, and that's where having kind of his name written next to market revolution, you can pull him in, and that's specific factual evidence. Now, it helps to kind of understand his role, but if I'm a reader, I am much more willing to give a point to somebody who is demonstrating that they see that connection than if I'm not. Okay. And again, we have women's rights movements. I know that was a DBQ that we kind of worked on in my class. How has the role of women changed over time? And this is the time where women are really starting to begin to organize themselves, to begin to have their first jobs outside the home, to begin to have their own financial independence. It's not developed at all. It's just in its infancy. But that's a really important thing to kind of keep in mind, that these two, abolitionism and women's rights, kind of go hand in hand. All right, looking at period 5, this is really the Civil War period. It really centers on the Civil War, but you do not have to know any battles. I mean, it certainly helps if you're kind of a Civil War aficionado. Show us what you know, as long as it fits within the prompt. But what I would really pay attention to are causes and effects. Causes, what led to the Civil War and what came from the Civil War. We know that westward expansion really leads more towards the Civil War, because as we are acquiring more and more pressure is put on these areas to choose whether they are free or slave. Whether we're talking about Kansas or Nebraska, there's multiple examples of violence that occurred because of people trying to persuade others to accept or to not accept slavery. Definitely keep this. What leads to the Civil War is this idea of manifest destiny. Now, I would actually say that this one is we'll kind of keep this separate for the moment. But I want to stay with Civil War. When we're talking about Civil War, I don't know. I haven't seen a ton of questions that really deal specifically with the Civil War. They tended to ask Civil War questions in multiple choice questions and not necessarily in writing prompts. So, I mean, I would just know that just the big things that come from it, the fact that Lincoln's election in 1860 was the straw that broke the camel's back. You might think about what led to that, which happens to be the creation of the Republican Party and the fact that one of their major ideas was the end of slavery. So there was a lot of fear about Lincoln being president. But really, I think the most important thing that comes out of this is Reconstruction. If I were to focus on two, I'd say westward expansion or Reconstruction. Reconstruction is the North's attempt to try to recreate itself in the South. There's a lot of argument whether it was successful or unsuccessful. I think arguments could be made on both sides, but I think, I know a lot of historians tend to think Reconstruction was not as successful as it could have been. Gentlemen, you want to add anything?
I'd say immediately after the war, Reconstruction did what should have done. Immediately. You started to see participation from African American men at levels in which they were elected into Congress and they were starting to get a voice. It wasn't until the election in which Tilden lost that really changed how Reconstruction came to be and how Jim Crow came back and how you had you still had problems with freed men trying to find an economic place in this country. You still had that problem, but that ability of them to be able to voice their opinion was huge, was very important. Freedmen's Bureau.
It was about
very
10 years, correct? So by the end of the Civil War to approximately 1875, we see that's kind of the golden age of Reconstruction.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
after that, it really falls apart. And the Southerners really push to reassert their own independence and own control.
With Tilden and Hayes, yes, that's very true.
And all throughout this period, we can go back and kind of consider this theme of changing power between different elements of the government. Arguments of states' rights, things like that, and how that kind of extends even into Reconstruction, because the federal government in a lot of ways was strengthened through the Civil War. But then there was also kind of some decisions made in Reconstruction to not impose federal force to a certain extent. As Megashar and Dorado mentioned, there was that golden age, but at some point they kind of give up on intervening in the South. So that's where you could think again about changing government and causation and this lack of compromise that leads to the Civil War, and try to pull some of those themes out that might help you make an argument across the periods.
Good.
Yeah, we do see increased immigration, especially from Ireland. A lot of the northern troops were made up of Irish soldiers, people who were immediately taken off the boat and conscripted and put into the army. We do see Asia, although what Asia is going to play a role, especially the Chinese, is more towards the end, especially when we need them to help build the railroad. So that's, again, immigration is going to be one of those themes that's going to run throughout all the periods. Sometimes we're really open to immigration, sometimes we're not. During this period, we needed immigration. We're talking about 600,000 soldiers on both sides in total were killed. So that's a large working group. And so labor was needed. And so they accepted, although they still looked down upon them. They didn't welcome with open arms. I think this is pretty straightforward. You guys okay to move on?
Yeah.
All right, so period 6, the Gilded Age. So notice the dates here, 1865. So the last one goes all the way to 1877, but period 6 now starts back at 1865. And what we see here is this is kind of, you see this often after wars, is that there's this kind of calming moment where everybody takes a deep breath and then a sort of new energy takes over. And so this is where America really kind of focuses its energies on creating wealth. Creating wealth, sometimes, most of the time, at the expense of the people who create the wealth. So the Gilded Age, I always think of this. This reminds me of one of my favorite. There's a rap group called Tribe Called Quest. They're from the 80s and early 90s, but they talked about all that's gilded's not gold. The idea being, this Gilded Age is real shiny on the outside, but inside it is just corrupt and nasty. And so that's how you kind of have to think of America during this time. There's a lot of people seeking their wealth. They're, making their dream come true. You can see where we really are successful. This is our second industrial revolution. This is the main industrial revolution. We get huge amounts of wealth centered in individuals. In fact, people like Andrew Carnegie and Pullman and any of those great industrialists, they were wealthier than many countries, which is amazing to think. I mean, we have this same thing today with like Jeff Bezos, who's worth $65 billion. The development of the railroads, and that was a direct result of the war. Railroads were built to transfer troops and supply, and now these railroads are going to be used to transport goods. We see the growth of big cities. Why big cities? Because that's where the factories are. People are moving from the countryside to the city. The war had disrupted everything. People wanted a new beginning. Maybe they had lost a mate. Maybe they had lost somebody in their family. They wanted to start over, so they moved to big cities. Plus, the immigrants moving in always move into the big cities first because they're going to move into neighborhoods that are like them. And we see a huge population growth in the United States during this time. However, underneath all this, how all this greatness was achieved were terrible working conditions. We know like young kids as young as 4 and 5 and 6 are working. We know kids are working 80, 90 hours a week. We know women are working. We know they're not being paid much. So when we talk about terrible working conditions, this is one of those big categories that it really helps to know a couple of examples, because I really think this can be applied across multiple periods again. The socioeconomic stratification, that's a very big concept, a lot of letters in that. But really what it means is we really start to see people moving into kind of these economic tiers: poor, middle class, rich. What did it mean to be a poor person? What did it mean to be middle class? What did it mean to be wealthy? So we have this sort of stratification where people were kind of pushed into these economic classes. And there was not a lot of interaction between these classes. So we're almost kind of falling back to kind of what life was like before the war. And then we see a huge amount of political corruption. Where money exists, where lots of money exists, usually corruption follows. And all corruption is people doing nefarious things to get access to the big pot of money. And so you might just want to kind of look at that. As far as some of the big concepts, we've talked about this: industrialization, the growth of big business. There could be an argument. This could very easily, there could be a question that kind of traces the economic growth of America. Well, this is going to be where America really explodes. If you're into gardening or flowers, this is when the flowers are really kind of appearing, and it's a really beautiful thing. And this is what industrial growth is. I mean, a lot of potential. So there's good and there's bad with it. Migration. Because of industrialization, they needed workers. So not only people moving within the country, but also people moving outside the country. I'm sorry, people moving from outside in. And then, of course, we see racial tensions and segregation. We see segregation most notably in the South, but don't ever just say it's in the South. There was segregation in the North and in the Midwest and West. Gentlemen, you want to add?
What Mr. Megashar said, is good. This is one where you can get some big people, okay, some big time people, and use them across the board. Jacob Reese, in regards to the pictures and the photographs that he took that showed the terrible conditions that these poor people lived in. The white ducks that went and cleaned up New York of all of the sanitation problems that it had. You've got
in Sinclair.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You've got Carnegie, you've got Rockefeller, you've got JP Morgan, you've got all those people that, as Mr. Megashar said, you can liken to technological revolutionary people today that have made their money. Bezos or, oh God, uh, Mark Cuban. There's so many ways that once again, you can make the connections of back then to today. Jane Addams. Um, I would have, maybe a very short list of people, but know them well, and have that to where you can put into different parts of periods that, either before or even after, that you can fit in quite easily.
So just within a notebook, Mr. Drive just said it, within a notebook, have key concepts put in there so that you can draw those out and use them. But use the ones that you're comfortable with. Don't try to explain something you're not too comfortable explaining. Mr. Wong, you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I think you guys cover that well. The idea of having a notebook where as you're doing this review, as you're preparing, you're going through the periods, you're thinking about some of these big concepts that we have even talked about. Even you got somewhere in your notebook, period 6, industrialization, and you're putting there, Andrew Carnegie and, talking about different ways that they use consolidation. The homestead strike as a reaction to Carnegie amassing so much wealth. Right, you got two kind of what we call specific factual information right there that could be used as outside information. Try to get those 2 points, right?
Sure.
One thing, in addition to kind of having this notes and reviewing, is going back, and we'll show you some links later, but looking at that rubric again, looking at the modified rubrics that we provided for our classes too, and thinking about what is this asking you, and thinking about how can I hit 5, 6, 7, 8 points? How am I going to pass this thing?
Exactly. That's good with the Homestead Act. I mean, the strikes. It's very good.
Yeah.
Even to, more recent times, you can go to the one percenters and the fight that we had with Wall Street, and how people finally were tired of being, of working their tails off and getting very little for it. How in a 35-year period, most people in this country actually were worse off, today than they were 35 years ago. So there are things that you can, once again, attach to what happened back then to what's happening today, quite simply.
All right, moving into this last period that you're obligated to know. This is kind of the reaction to the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age was America really, becoming kind of the America we know today. This is the result of that. This is the first time we start to see the U.S. stepping outside its own borders and flexing its muscles. This is where we see the U.S. Becoming a decision maker within the world. This is also the time when we have one of our greatest economic depressions. Some would say, well, isn't it the greatest? Some might argue what we're in right now may be worse. So I do know the number of unemployed is greater than it was during the Great Depression, but I think that's just raw numbers.
That's raw numbers. It's about 15% versus 25%. So it's raw numbers.
Yeah. So anyway, so what do we see with all the negative, with all the, we start to get a group of people called progressives. And I always say, what word is within this word? Progress. What were these people trying to advocate for? Progress. Where do we see them try to advocate? And just what Mr. Dorado said, Jane Addams and Jacob Riis and Upton Sinclair, and there's multiple people who attempt to bring about change. As a president, the one president who really pushed it more than any other, this is what he's probably most famous for, this is Theodore Roosevelt. So that would be a name that I might put in with Theodore Roosevelt or with progressive reforms. Imperialism. So as the rest of the world begins to kind of carve up the last little areas yet to be carved up, the U.S. wants a piece. Where do we go? Well, as we continue westward, we reach the end of North America, we continue to look westward. So what we begin to see is, well, what country is way over there that we want to have business with, that we want to trade with? That country is China. even China of 1890 has huge potential. I once talked about this in classes. Think about if every single person in China bought one pack of gum, how many packs, the sheer volume of gum being sold in China is tremendous. So China always holds this sort of dream. And American politicians and business people wanted to be a part of that. Europe was a part of it. We wanted our piece. So as we begin to move even further westward, we take Hawaii, we take the Philippines, we take Guam, not in any order, Guam, we open up Japan, we ultimately make our way to China. And so what we're doing here is we're essentially setting up kind of coal stations along the way that will fuel the ships that are going to trade, that are going to send our goods to China. And so this is an incredibly important time period for the U.S. We're also kind of learning how to fight. We had a civil war that happened 35 years before that, but you kind of forget what war is like when the next generation kind of doesn't fight. And so this is our attempt to kind of begin to wet our whistle. Where does that ultimately play out is World War I. Now, remember, World War I actually starts in 1914. The United States does not join until 1917. So there's a 3-year period where the United States, essentially, we bankrolled the war for both sides, really. There's a lot of research that shows that we were playing both sides of the game. We were giving loans to Germany. We were giving loans to Great Britain. We were giving armaments to Austria, and we were giving armaments to Russia. So we were playing our role as a businessman. The business of America is business. And World War I was a great opportunity for us. It's not until 1917 when the Germans really start going after American shipping with their submarines that we start to see the United States actively wanting to become involved in the war. And even up until the time the United States joined the war, most people were against the war. Wilson led us into the war. His campaign slogan, I think, in 1916 was, "I've kept us out of the war," and the next year he takes us into the war. When we talk about World War I, what we get out of this is this puts America in kind of the international spotlight. Because we're untouched during the war, because we're a country that's producing goods and financing the war, we really do pretty well. We end up losing 140,000 men, I believe. If that number is, it's probably close to that. 140,000 men died, but that's nowhere near what like Great Britain, Russia, France lost, and Germany. They were losing millions of men killed. We only lost 100,000 approximately. So that kind of put us into kind of this preeminent time. World War I leads right into the 1920s. If you guys read The Great Gatsby, then you know kind of the exuberance of what the 20s kind of brought. That might be one additional bullet point we might want to include in there, because this period is really important as far as America kind of stepping out. The Great Depression, this just becomes an economic issue. Basically, I don't know. I'm kind of, Mr. Dorado or Mr. Wong, you guys want to talk about the Great Depression? I need to catch my breath here. I'm getting
the Great Depression, in some ways, is this culmination still of maybe a Gilded Age type of laissez-faire. This idea that the government shouldn't have heavy regulation of the economy, based on some of these ideas of, the economy can regulate itself without the need for a lot of regulation. That's essentially just another word for control. I think that's a big part of a contributing factor to the Depression. It's not the only one, but even just looking at its impact in our country in terms of how it motivates a lot of common people to really now kind of think about how they want the federal government to do things to ensure their welfare. through things like the New Deal programs.
Yeah, what are the basic expectations that all governments must provide to its people? And that's safety, security, perhaps healthcare, perhaps education, perhaps what are the responsibilities? I would agree. We see a lot of this right now. Business leaders were in charge of our government during this time, right before the Great Depression. And so it took not having a business leader being president that allowed us to begin to move out of it, because he was able to, and I'm talking about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was able to institute new ways to get our country going. He started all the triple letter programs, whether it's the Tennessee Valley Authority or the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the Public Works Administration. All these things that he created help to hire and get people working again. And that's when we talk about the New Deal, we're talking about that time period where the federal government really steps in and begins to kind of navigate our country where we're going economically, socially. Whereas before then, the government kind of had that laissez-faire, hands-off kind of idea. Then lastly, World War II. Again, do you need to know any battles? No. What led us to World War II? We could say the surprise attack on Japan, or by Japan, on Pearl Harbor, but we can also say that the United States' position in the world caused our entrance into the war. We were doing the exact same thing that we did in World War I, where we're supplying goods, material, money to the belligerents, to the fighting countries, and we're making a great penny off of it. The issue is we try to limit Japan's access to oil, and they really don't like that. And I'm getting way too deep into this, but that's ultimately one of the main reasons why the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 41. That immediately brings us into the war. It takes us almost a full year to fully become invested in the war. But the last 2 years of the war, 44 and 45, the United States plays a huge presence both in Europe and in the Pacific. And then the last thing is what is an effect of World War II? And we truly want to, this is where the United States truly stands above everyone else on the world stage. You could argue the Soviet Union because they were kind of a co-equal power, but this is where the United States truly becomes the world leader. Gentlemen, you want to add anything?
No, that's good.
In the aftermath of World War II, international politics is completely restructured. I'm just thinking about, everything that comes after it, and even the world we live in today. And, there's some things that, with President Trump's administration about having some resistance against paying into NATO and the United Nations. And these are groups that are set up in the aftermath of World War II. So again, thinking politically, trying to think across those times.
Well, making comparison, World War I, at the end of World War I, there was an attempt with the League of Nations to organize kind of a world organization of countries. The United States didn't join it. We try again after World War II, and we become the leader of it. Although you might argue we don't even play a role in it much anymore. But so that's kind of where we're ending up. So understand, can you kind of walk your way through? I know we've already gone kind of an hour and 15 minutes, so we kind of need to hurry. But really the last one, if you have to make any final connections, think about the time period 45 to 80. We started, if you remember, 1980 with period 9. It's not even on here. With period 9. So when we talk about this period, I really think you could probably not worry about it much at all, as long as you understand that coming out of the war, there were two real strong groups, communists, capitalists. I don't know, because there's not going to be any questions over Cold War, civil rights, or polarization. So I would just say we skip this.
I would. The only what connection I would make is after World War I and communism after World War II, the same thing. First Red Scare, second Red Scare. I would make that connection. I would also think how, just thinking about what they may do, how did our country respond directly after major wars? You know, how did we respond after the Revolutionary War? How did we respond after the Civil War? How did we respond after the Spanish-American War? How did we respond after World War I? How did we respond after World War II? And I think what you would find is that in almost all cases, we're sort of like the peacock that's spreading its feathers. You know, here we are, this powerful nation that has just defeated a country that we needed in regards to Britain. Here we are, this powerful nation that came in and made sure that we made the entire world safe for democracy. You know, here we are, this powerful nation that has now taken over different parts of the world that has made our wealth even that much greater. And so you can definitely, I think you can make connections quite simply as to how we reacted after each and every major conflict that we were in. And something to think of, I think, something to keep in the back.
Yeah, I would look at that economically. Each time after a great war, there was a little bit of initial struggle, but we exploded economically after each of those wars. And you might kind of think about that.
Yeah.
All right. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because you can just kind of read it. What these are just kind of general kind of hints and tips. You know, here's before you take the test. It's very, very important that you have your area set up, and that includes having your like Google Docs already created. You don't want to waste any of the 45 minutes, none, because it's going to take all 45 minutes. Now, some of you I know have like accommodations, so you may get a little bit extra time, but you want to make sure that you access and use all of that. So what we are really advising is this. You already have your Google Doc pages already set up, already pulled up. At the top of each one, you have your exam or your AP ID number. You have your initials. And then what we are advocating is they are saying you can upload your document. They are saying you could write it on a piece of paper and take a picture of it. They are saying you can cut and paste. What we are arguing and what we have heard from other teachers who have already kind of monitored the test, copying and pasting into the text box that they give you is by far the best. We're not saying you can't do the other ones, but this is by far the best. Okay? And if you kind of take care of these little simple things, I think what you'll do is you'll be able to save time over the course of that 45 minutes. As far as an annotation page, what I would suggest, if you happen to have a printer or you know somebody that has a printer, you find one of these annotation pages that you worked on. Each one of us kind of have a little bit different one because we each kind of teach it a little bit differently, but they force the student to do exactly the same thing. So find one. I'm just going to happen to pull mine up right here. So my suggestion is you print this out so that I have it physically on my desk. And when I go to break this down, and I took this from Heimler's History, if you've watched any of his videos, he's done a great job over these last couple of weeks of really explaining how to do specific parts of the DBQ. So if you have questions, go to Heimler's History, and he's done a really good job of explaining. But how he does it is he kind of forces you to kind of break down the question. He forces you to write down a couple of main ideas. Can you tie any outside evidence? Can you do a HIP with this document? Can you organize your claims? Here's a sample thesis. You get the idea. So find one of these that works for you and have that on your desk so that you can physically write into it. I would not sit there and type it so that you're going back and forth between tabs. If I don't have a printer, I can physically get a piece of paper and I can make one of these charts myself. So you have enough time, you got 48 hours essentially, you're going to be able to create one of these yourself. But I would definitely make sure that you have some sort of like annotation sheet that you can break down quickly. You do not want to have to keep going back to the documents often, okay? And when we say we also have some contextualization items, have on your notebook, period 1, period 2, period 3, period 4, and each one of those periods, each one of those periods, I would have key terms that I know I can talk about. Don't write a bunch of terms in there that you don't even know what they mean. Write terms in there that you know. Well, what if I don't know any of them? Then write the ones you kind of know. Write something.
Or study more.
Or study more. But at this point, you're over studying. You should just be reviewing and making sure that you have yourself ready to go, because cramming in at this point is not really going to help. Okay, I'll just be honest with that. We also have, and I'm going to let Mr. Dorado actually talk about this. I think this is a great idea. I wish I would have incorporated this myself, but I would like Mr. Dorado.
I noticed when I was reading my kids' essays that they had difficulty with the thesis. I noticed that they had hard time with it. If you have a hard time with it, these are just a couple of examples that you can use, that you can plug in anything and they would work. Okay, so if you use that first one, for example, by looking at, and then whatever your topic is, by looking at the Great Depression, by looking at wars that the United States has entered. Okay, one can see, what are you arguing? That America has came out of that war more economically independent, or that one can see that through the Great Depression, our country suffered economically to a great degree, which is because, and then this is where you put your counter argument is, because of the concentration of wealth that was in the hands of a few and not distributed amongst most people, we suffered because of that. So you can use these different these templates, and I think use them quite easily. I would even suggest on your paper that you are putting your name and your AP number on those. Put this in. Put this in there. Put all of them in, and whichever one you use, put it in. The other ones you don't use, you can delete it very quickly. And this, once again, would be something that would look easier.
Mr. Dorado, each one of these, this is a different type of thesis.
Exactly.
So it's not all of one. There are 3 different types that you could try to incorporate. Use one that's comfortable for you.
Mm-hmm. I would do that. If you are good with the thesis, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. If you feel comfortable with it, then don't, this is just something that's on a slide that you don't have to worry. But if you have difficulty with the thesis, if you have difficulty with coming up with one, this could help you.
Is that considered cheating?
Not at all.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. It's not. This is the same as if you were to take your notes and use them. There's nothing different within this than anything else. This is exactly the same.
But
really, the only thing, I'm sorry?
What is cheating? Me opening up a Google Doc and sharing it with somebody else.
Exactly, and that's where you can't go. Okay, if you're going to, and Mr. Wong said this today when the 3 of us talked earlier, if you are going to speak with someone that you guys have worked with throughout the semester or throughout the year, if you are going to then talk about how you want to do this, who has this information versus that information, do it all before. I mean, get it all done before you take this thing on Friday. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That's perfectly fine. It's just that while you're taking this, you can't contact someone else, or you cannot do that. That's something you can't do.
Yes.
Don't jeopardize your score. Don't do it.
And AP is very vindictive. Don't think that, oh, there's 300,000 kids. They won't catch me. Yeah, they will. And they can screw you because they can not send your scores to colleges. Well,
not have you take the
I want my
SAT.
score.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, SAT, ACT, they control all of that. So it's not worth it. Just give it your best shot. Go in there with a good positive feeling, give it your best shot and walk away and say, you know what, I did my best.
Being prepared day of too, having your workstation set up with everything that Megashar and Dorado have mentioned. Maybe you're going to use the magic thesis statement. Be prepared to kind of think about using that. Having your review notes, but not being dependent on them. You don't want to waste time going into a web search or even opening up a textbook and going into the index and trying to look up something. You really kind of want to have that ready. Something Megashar and Dorado mentioned earlier when we were in a meeting about this is getting a really good night's sleep, guys. Making sure that you're pushing for 8, 9, 10 hours, letting it happen, going to bed at ease because you prepared in advance, eating a really good, full, hearty breakfast so that your body has energy to work on. Our brains are burning tons of the energy that we consume. So just being prepared in that sense. And the more prepared you are going to be beforehand, the more you're going to feel at ease. And then all you got to do is prove to yourself that you're everything that you've worked for, guys, this whole year. You're proving this to yourself, that you are going to try your best on this assessment and try to get that passing score. Try to go even beyond that if you can, and doing that preparation now, not waiting, because we don't have a lot of time left.
We don't. So the last thing we kind of talked about here was the plan, and this is knowing your rubric, knowing where you can score and what points you can definitely go for. So the plan that we have here is a simple one where you can get 7 points very, very easily if you kind of concentrate on certain aspects of the test or on this essay. So that's why it's so important that you make sure that you review the rubric and make sure that you are covering everything. That is covered in those DBQ note sheets. You know you will cover everything if you're able to fill in as much as you can. There's just a couple things I think we have to make sure we talk about. And this one is you have 10 minutes really to be able to read through the documents and annotate. 15 at the absolute maximum, but if you can get out in 10, more power, because that's 35 minutes to write. You should be writing somewhere between a 3 and 5 paragraph essay. Mr. Dorado here, and I agree with him 100%, go use 2 documents that you know you can use, and first of all, make sure you describe them, make sure that you use them. You can earn a lot of points this way. I don't know, Mr. Dorado, do you kind of want to talk on this, or is it kind of self-explanatory?
Well, when I was thinking of this plan, I was thinking of something that I believe realistically each and every one of you can do. I think of the 5, you can find 2 documents that you feel comfortable with. If you prepared accordingly, contextualization should be a piece of cake for you because you have already done it. You've already done it in regards to the different periods. So you already know what has happened before, what's going on during. You already have that information, so that's a piece of cake. The thesis is something that, once again, you should have. So just there are 4 points. Just right there. There's 4 points. One for having the 2 documents, the other one for the support of those 2 documents, one for contextualization, and one for thesis. That's 4 points that you should have as no-brainers, okay? As no-brainers. Then if you prepared properly, you should have outside information. If you just have 1 document and CER it, or 1 piece of evidence, there's your 5th point. If you have a HIP, there you go with your 6th. So this is an extremely simple way, I believe, that you can get 7 points. Okay, I think you can get it. I think as well, if you find that 36 minutes you're done, go back and put in 2 more documents. It really doesn't, I don't think it matters to the readers how beautifully your essay flows. I think what matters is that you have the information. So as long as you can put in another paragraph that has, your 3rd document and your 4th document, there you go with 2 more points. What I found with my students, they would go through and have 3 documents. That's silly. That's not using your time well, because 3 documents doesn't get you anything. It doesn't get you a point. Okay, either go to 4 or go to 2.
I will argue, though, if you're trying to do just to be safe and cover yourself, so 2 documents plus just do 1 extra so that you can cover, just in case you get one of the other ones wrong. That would be the reason why you'd want to do 3.
Okay, that could be. But
but it's all about time.
Yes, exactly. It's all about time. Okay, that's what it's about. And the more at ease you feel with your time, you're going to feel pressure. There's no question about it. You're
Yeah.
going to feel it. But the more at ease you feel that, hey, I can do this. I can find 2 documents. I can do this. I think the easier it's going to be for you to put together a good essay.
I will add,
Okay.
when you're including those 2 documents and you're citing those 2 documents, paraphrase what's in it, and then at the end, in parentheses, document 1, parentheses, period. That's all you have to do. You don't have to go according to document 1 or in document 1. You just need to state what evidence you see and then place in parentheses at the end, document 1, document 2, whatever. But yeah, let me add one last thing, because I have graded, graded DBQ for world history, and one of the things that is stressed to us over and over is grammar and spelling does not matter. It does not matter. It's all about ideas. Now, it does matter if we can't read what you're saying. If you're just randomly throwing words together, that doesn't, John Calhoun, Abe Lincoln, sectionalism, period. That's not going to work. Okay, so you got to have coherent thoughts, but to be honest, grammar and spelling doesn't matter. You are writing it on a Google Doc, so it certainly would help, but that's only if you have time. I think we need to kind of show these last 2 so we can get out of here. These just kind of go through some of the suggestions. So this is the copy and paste suggestion. You can see exactly, you're going to have a 15,000 character field that's about 5 pages. I don't think anybody in here can write 5 pages in 30 minutes. Well, I can. Okay, well, you're special. But the reality is you're going to be under a lot of pressure. 3 to 5 paragraphs is what you want to do. Copy that sucker, paste it into the field, and then hit submit. That has been by far the best one. Don't forget also that the device you use to access the question has to be the device you use to submit. I cannot access it with my computer and then write it on my phone. Okay, so I have to do one or the other. Anything else in that one?
Make sure on your computers, I'm not sure if it's on this, make sure that you get rid of Grammarly. That's really important. If you have a computer that has Grammarly on it, you got to take it off. You got to disable it, because Grammarly does things that the AP will consider cheating. So you have to be very careful with that. You can't use it. You can use spell check. You could use that. But Grammarly, that program, you cannot use. Okay, so if you have it, get rid of it. All right, disable it. Make sure that it's not on your computer. Okay, make sure that it's not.
All right.
That's all I got.
Really, this is about attaching a text. Again, I would say avoid this at all possible. But if you use a Google Doc, you have to use this method. Google Doc, download as a PDF document, upload it. But we're finding that this is the way that a lot of people are getting stuck. So just be careful about that. Here's the comment about disabling Grammarly.
Good. Very good. Okay.
And then really the last thing, these are just a couple of suggestions here right at the end. Make sure you've practiced the demo from College Board, and all that demo is practicing submitting, so that you understand you do not want to sit there for the 5-minute period and try to figure out how to submit. Practice it beforehand. They let you practice it as many times as you want, so you can see which way kind of feels best for you. Answer the question. Everything you do should go back to the prompt. If you are not writing about the prompt, you're not writing a correct answer. Everything you do, every single sentence should be about what the prompt is asking you to do. Make sure you're familiar with the prompt. Make sure you're writing everything in CERs, right? Claim, evidence. I always forget what R is. What is R? Respond? No. What's R?
Reasoning.
Reasoning, thank you. I got one student who's awake still. Thank you. Who was that?
Yes, CJ.
CJ. Thank you, CJ.
Look at it in the text, though.
Zero distractions. Okay. You have to convince your family to get the hell off of Wi-Fi for 1 hour. You have to. You do not want to have any reason why the Wi-Fi would fail. So please, if that means you got to do something really nice for somebody in your family, you know, take the hit, do it. But make sure from 1:45 essentially to 2:45, you're not going to be disrupted. People are not going to have an Xbox tournament at your house. Just try to control as much as you can. Okay, make sure your device is fully charged. In fact, the best thing to do would be to plug it in. But if you're in my class, then all of you seem to have lost your charger. So I don't know how you ever charge anything, to be honest. You know, make sure you've practiced where each of your your notes are, your period reviews. Make sure you know where those are so you can access them quickly if you need to. And then more than anything, keep an eye on the timer. The timer will appear, from what I understand, either in the upper left-hand or upper right-hand corner. And when it turns red, you know you're going to have 5 minutes to submit. At that point, finish the sentence that you're on and try to submit. That is my suggestion. Don't sit there and go, well, I got to finish this one sentence. And then you get caught up, and next thing you know, you got 5 seconds to submit. Okay, so finish the sentence you're on. When it gets to 5 minutes or less, it'll turn red. And get that sucker submitted. Okay, make sure you hit the submit button. Wait till you see the word congrats. If you have an issue, then you'd go back to, I think, screen number 2 or 3. That shows you how you can solve that problem. So those are notes. I mean, I appreciate, gosh, everybody staying in on this. I mean, it's what, 9:37. That's a whole hour and 37 minutes of your guys' time. So I appreciate that. I know we all do.
Yeah, good job, guys, sticking around for this.
Hey, guys, keep in mind, I know submitting, you're thinking I can submit in 10 seconds so I can write for another 4 minutes. Don't think that way. There are going to be close to 500,000, probably close to 600,000 people that are taking this test at the same time, okay? You've got to understand that their servers can only take so much. You need to understand that. So when it comes time for you to submit, you've got to start going at it. You have to. Please don't play that game, because if you don't submit in that time, you don't get any credit. It's that simple. You just don't get any credit. College Board will say sorry. So please understand that. Please make sure that it's not something silly. And as they told us, you don't have to put everything in that essay. It may be a little unclear, but as long as you have your points in, you can still get a 5. Okay, it doesn't have to be a perfect essay for you to get a 5 or a 4. It doesn't. So understand that, please. Don't think, God, I got to put this paragraph in, or I'm not. No. Time to submit, you submit. Okay, get it in. And they know, believe me, they know 45 minutes is an extremely short amount of time for you to do this. They understand. Okay, they understand it.
All right, I see one question here. It seems, well, first of all, Quinn seems to think I'm roasting my class. No, everybody does lose their chargers. So that's not roasting, that's truth. But there's a question for Bella that says, Mr. Wong doesn't have us write conclusions, so what do I do? Remember, your last paragraph really should be a restatement of your thesis. As a reader, one of the things we were told to look in 3 places for thesis: the first paragraph, the last paragraph, and if you don't see them in those 2, then look in the second paragraph. So understand, if you restate your thesis at the end, that gives you a much better chance of earning that point. So Bella, I hope I answered that question. Do you want to pass? Yes, I would like everybody in here to pass. I don't know. I don't really see. It's looking like 5 points is going to be passing, but you can't rely upon that. I would say 6 is going to be safe. 7 is best.
Yes.
I mean, 10 is awesome. Don't get me wrong. Go for 10. 7's good. I think everybody in here would be happy with 7 points. I know I would be. All right. Any last questions? We need to wrap this up. Old guy's about ready to go to bed. You guys are about ready to go out, I'm sure.
We have one last question also that I'll ask here about what happens if the Wi-Fi cut during the exam. Is that something have to write the College Board about that?
Yeah, that would.
Exactly. That's what I typed.
That's
what
right. Let's see, where are we? I'm going back up to it. Yeah, if there is an issue with Wi-Fi, which there very well could be, go back to this page, and you'll have 48 hours to request a makeup exam, which happens in June.
June 3rd at noon.
Yeah.
Okay, is the makeup. June 3rd at noon.
And if you don't get that one, then you don't get anything.
Yep.
That's a do or die at that point.
I have a question.
Middle of July, Gray, in terms of when you will get your scores.
All right. Anything else?
Who said that? Someone said their friend took the A plate. Quincy. Same thing. If it doesn't let you submit, you've got 48 hours to explain what happened and to get a ticket for the June, okay, for the makeup.
We're
All right.
hoping, you know, if
So,
you got
yeah,
your Google Doc open, that maybe in the worst case scenario, you still got that stuff auto saved.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
they're going to be really open to allow people to take the makeup exam. And you don't get to choose which exam, you know, you don't get to choose which score you're going to get. So, all right.
No, Jason, they can't use it against you. They
Yeah.
can't. It's just that you won't get credit for the course. That's the only thing. They won't say, hey, Nick Dorado only got a 1. We got to make sure that we don't admit him to our school. Okay, that wouldn't be the reason why they wouldn't admit me. It would have to be much more than getting a low score on an AP test. Okay, so they're not going to use it against you.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Uh-huh.
Nice,
I think
Bella.
that's everybody else. I think we're
Apush
good.
exam. You mean 3-hour nap. Too bad it's only 45 minutes.
Yeah, Dre, you would, as long as you pass the class with a C or higher. No, even with the D, you would still get the credit. But in order for you to get the bump up, you need a C or higher to get the bump up. Okay, from a C to a B, so to speak.
C minus or higher.
Well, C minus or higher. Okay, but yeah, this in essence takes the place of your final, is what this does.
If we fail this final or anything like that, do they make you retake the AP course for next year as a senior?
This isn't a final.
No, this isn't a final, number one. Your score is not dependent upon your high school GPA. Okay, this has nothing to do with your class per se. What we have done in terms of the AP class is, as long as you take the test in a normal circumstance, then you are exempt from taking the final exam. Okay, regardless of what your score is, you're exempt. So to answer your question, no. If you pass the class, then you're good. If you fail the class, they will not force you to take AP again, but they will probably, suggest to you to take U.S. history over the summer. They will probably suggest that. But no, you don't have to take it again. I think all three of us have had some students that did poorly their junior year or sophomore year and wanted to take it again their senior year to bump up that grade. We've had kids do that, but you're not forced at all to do it again. Okay, no, that doesn't exist.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? All right, those of you that have stayed, as Mr. Megashar, Mr. Wong said, thank you. Hey, for all three of us, if you have any questions at all, you know what to do. Okay, contact us. We will do everything we can to help you. On test day, to be honest with you, I think you're probably on your own. Okay, there's not much we can do on test day. All right, there's not much. But, for tomorrow, definitely. All right, definitely. If you need something, let us know. All right. Okay, and my group those of you that are still around, there is a, I've got something tomorrow for you on Canvas. Please look it over. Okay, please look it over. I think it can help you. All right? Okay. I'm good.
Believe in you.
Good night, guys. Bye. Thank you for the talk.
Thank
Night.
you.
Thank you.
See ya.
I really appreciate it. Thank you much.
Thank you.